It's really a process that is so complex. I don't really think one person or just one researcher can really encapsulate the whole story.
When you say trafficking, I think most people in America think sex trafficking. And I think that there's this glorified horror to sex work that isn't applied yet to labor.
These snakeheads have a lot riding on these kids. When there's that much money at stake, they want to make sure that the kids are out there working and paying it back.
There's a huge amount of exploitation, and the journeys that people undertake are dangerous journeys. People die en route. And when they arrive here, they can often be held at gunpoint until they pay off the balance of their fees.
This is close to $1 billion business. There are so many people making money from this every year.
There are people who you could go and see and you could pay them to get you from point A to point B. And if you didn't have a passport, or you didn't have a visa, that wasn't a problem.
We have to work until 10 and we close the restaurant and we take a shower, we came down and then we cook something to eat. Just work, sleep, eat, work, sleep, eat.
She said she first started realizing that this wasn't okay when American families would bring in their kids to the restaurant, and she had to wait on like other 14-year-old kids that were eating there. And it was the first time she realized that she should be able to have a childhood and deserved having a childhood as well.
I got a call from her, absolutely terrified, saying, "The snakeheads know I was moved." And this was absolutely shocking and really, really terrifying to me because we had her case basically sealed in the courts.
It's a no-brainer. If you're a drug smuggler and you have that logistical network, why not go into the people smuggling trade? Why not go into the snakehead trade? The profit margins are just as high. The penalties if you're caught are much, much lower. And the other thing is, your merchandise can walk.
Traditionally described as 8 parts mountain, 1 part water, and 1 part farmland, Fujian province sits along the southeastern coast of China. With a population of 36.2 million people, its chief exports include mechanical and electrical products, automatic data processing equipment, textiles, garments, and footwear. But beyond these, there is one export that has reached the ports of nearly every major city in the world: people.
I think that when you're talking about a trafficking scenario, it's not about the work. It's about the psychological coercion, the conditions placed around your work, the sacrifices that you're made to take, and the lack of control you have over your whole life. I think that that is what makes trafficking trafficking.
How did you find out that you'll be coming to America?
很小的时候，家里的人就跟我说了。那我爸爸是希望我在美国多赚点钱给他。
他们希望我的家庭可以过得很好啊。对他们来讲的话，美国就是一个天堂，就是一个银行。
因为我是家里面最大的，而且我弟弟还在读书，我是女孩子吧，然后就他们就是喜欢。就是什么重男轻女，
他们把我当成男孩子一样咯。在中国来说，男生就是用来赚钱的。
And how did that make you feel?
怎么样啊？但是我可不可以不讲啊？
Most of the Chinese youth that I work with, they were actually sent to the United States from their parents. They tend to be victims of abuse when they're growing up, or especially victims of neglect as well. And it's actually the parents' idea that they come to the U.S. with snakeheads and be involved in these indentured servitude, debt bondage, trafficking scenarios.
This is Fujian, China. You're talking to kids that have grown up in a social network that is deeply, deeply rooted in this sense of filial piety. It's very, very unlikely that the child is going to say no. And so people take that to mean consent.
在那个大厅里面，我站在那个门口，他们就知道 他们就说我在中国没有什么就是作为，没有什么前途，然后就让我来美国。因为我在上学的时候他们就讲过了，然后我就以为是那种，就以为他们随便说说的。然后他们说要我去美国，然后我就说我不想去，我要待在家里。然后他们就生气，然后就说你不去的话，你就不要当我女儿了，我就不认你了。
I might ask a kid, did you have a choice? They'll be like, my parent asked me. If you talk to them more, they'll say they asked me, but it's not as if I had any say in the matter at all. Asking means going.
In an area like Fujian province, what started happening is you had people who had lived as neighbors in a little village for centuries. This was not the poorest part of China. It's never been the poorest part of China. But suddenly, one family in the village is doing much better, and they get a refrigerator. Everybody else in the village is suddenly looking at them and wondering, well, why are they doing better? And this income disparity is actually what drives people to leave. It's sort of the recognition that there is something else, something beyond what you've had.
During the California gold rush of the mid-1800s, Chinese laborers migrated to the U.S. in search of their fortune, often borrowing large sums of money to fund their journey. Over 100 years later, modern smugglers known as snakeheads have developed this system into a worldwide clandestine industry that has transported thousands of Chinese migrants to the United States. Historically, this system has been used to transport adults, but more recently, it has been used to smuggle children.
During my first interview with my client, we were talking about how she arrived in the United States, and she kept saying this one word.
She was like, "Shuto." I was like, "Shuto? What? I don't know shuto."
It sounds just like the word for rock in Chinese, so I had no idea what she was saying.
I remember looking in the dictionary. I have a dictionary. I remember being like, "Sha." Which sha? Oh, snake, toe, head. Snakehead. What is that?
I ended up going home and asking my mother if she had ever heard of this term. My mom said, yeah, that's snakeheads. Those are these people who basically smuggle people in.
As I got more and more Chinese clients, it became very clear that this was a pattern that was happening in the US.
These brokers emerged in Southeast China, these people who became known as snakeheads, and they were almost like travel agents, like illicit travel agents. They were people who you could go and see, and you could pay them to get you from point A to point B. And if you didn't have a passport or you didn't have a visa, that wasn't a problem.
I think a snakehead is an interchangeably used term. We're not talking about people that have business cards that say, Mr. Wong, snakehead. It's really how the children identify them.
蛇头，我了解的并不是很多，但是我知道的是，他们首先他们会拿走你的护照，他们可能会拿去签证什么的，但是不是签到美国这边，他们可能会签到另外一个国家，比如说厄瓜多尔，我就是这样子。他们宁愿签证让我到了那边。
蛇头他们就是不是一个人，而是全部的人。我们去的每一个地方都有不同的人，但是他们都有联系，都不知道对方，不是有一个最大的老板。
觉得他们就是他们对我们这样子就是投毒的人，他们感觉你们只是一种货物，不当你们是人看，就是他们能把你放到哪里，给你们一点吃的，你们饿不死，然后把你们运到美国，他们就算达到了目的。
The story of the snakeheads can be traced throughout the history of Fujian, a province whose people have traditionally looked abroad for fortune and success. Over the course of hundreds of years, the Fujianese have greatly contributed to a massive Chinese diaspora all over the globe. In nearly every major city of the world, tightly knit enclaves emerged, mirroring their home communities in China. The snakeheads found that they could take advantage of their ties to friends and family members throughout the world. With a large enough kinship network and a sufficient supply of cash, they could move their clients from country to country, exploiting weak border controls and officials susceptible to bribery until they reached their ultimate destination.
Particularly after Tiananmen Square in 1989, demand skyrocketed. And a lot of the snakeheads began running a slightly more logistically complex operation. And at that point, the fees, the prices went up. And law enforcement was beginning to catch on in various countries. And so they developed these really sophisticated networks where they had contacts really all over the world.
我是从长乐坐汽车到深圳，然后从深圳我再坐小汽车到香港，然后我从香港乘坐飞机到了厄瓜多尔，然后在厄瓜多尔我有待了差不多半年，然后又坐飞机到了洪都拉斯那边，然后接下去就是一直坐汽车到墨西哥，然后在墨西哥待了差不多半个月，然后我就走路进入美国。
Right now, the debt that the Chinese children face for their transport is between $75,000 and $85,000. There are often a lot of extra fees that they incur on the way. I had a client who used the bathroom on an airplane, so they said that was an extra $5,000. And then oftentimes attorneys who are working with the snakeheads get paid extra fees as well, which adds to the child's debt. So I have one client whose debt is $115,000.
The journeys that people undertake are dangerous journeys. People die en route. And when they arrive here, they can often be held at gunpoint until they pay off the balance of their fees.
Some of the girls have been raped on the way up here. I mean, that's something that happens fairly frequently.
One of my clients was going to have to climb up under a truck and literally hang on to two beams and so she could watch the road go under her. And she was terrified. She said, there's no way I'm doing that. They finally went in, held her at gunpoint, said, you're going now or you're going back to China. She's like, okay, I'm going now. But then when she arrived in the United States, they're like, oh, you delayed us $10,000 extra.
The trip took her 9 months, and she was starved, malnourished. She had scratches all over and rashes, and she was terrified of the snakeheads because she said every time she called home, her mother said, they're coming over here and threatening to hurt me and hurt your little brother.
他们说你就是坐飞机飞来飞去，然后就飞到美国了。然后他们有的是会说跟你说到墨西哥，然后你们就过来，不会跟你说你要去爬山啊，有的人都要去坐船啊什么的。
来墨西哥的时候就那个爬山那里，然后就经历了很多，因为走的时候就3个中国人，然后有2个男生，我们3个被人扔在山上，然后我们3个都受了伤，但是他们还愿意帮我，就是背我，然后让我跟我一起走，没有把我抛下去。
他是怕我们逃掉，不付这一笔钱，把我们关在里面2天，
然后有的时候就不给我们吃饭啊什么的。因为我们在那里待了很久，然后有一个中国男生说向他们要那个就回中国的机票，然后那个蛇头就是那些蛇头那个人说，他说如果你再敢要那个回中国的机票的话，我已经打电话给你的蛇头了，你的蛇头说就让你死在这边，回不去。
You know, they've been spending months in a dirty safe house in the desert in Mexico, and now all of a sudden they're hiding under a tumbleweed because the Border Patrol helicopter is overhead, shining a spotlight on them. At that point, they're probably thinking, this journey that I've been on has gone terribly, terribly awry. For those that are able to make it across and get to their ultimate destination, we never hear about them. We never know about them. The only reason we even know about these cases is because they actually got caught.
In my client's case, the various contacts that she had with her parents seemed to always come back to the question of, have you found a job yet? It was her understanding that she was just going to work off paying off the loans that her parents had taken from relatives and friends. She wasn't clear on the amount.
A lot of times, they keep the child in the dark about what debt what debt has been agreed to. And so the child comes and they just know that there's some arrangement that their parents entered into with the snakeheads. And that debt is something that they're supposed to pay off once they get to the United States.
钱我不太清楚，但是我知道应该要花很多钱。
8万美金，但是我才付一半，我还没有全部付。这一半就是我自己的，还有一半就是向亲戚朋友借的。有的时候他们因为也不是有的亲戚都会帮忙，他们想要我们如果借了以后一个月一个月这样子会有利息，借一下会有利息，然后再还给他们。
The pressure these kids experience can be really very, very traumatic. Their families are saying, you know, you're not sending us enough money. And here this kid is just working herself to the bone, and her family is still there saying, you've got to send money. They're threatening me, or I'm in trouble if you don't send the money. And it's really an incredible pressure on these young people.
有的时候如果我找不到工作，或者他自己就是那些蛇头很愿意，就是说，因为蛇头有的时候你不知道，他没跟你说是做什么工作，所以我想很多人应该都不会找那个蛇头，
不知道安不安全。
对。
The journey to America often ends in New York City's Chinatown, in a 3-block area known for its specialized underground employment agencies, or what Chinese immigrants call tiashuashuas. The shop holds listings for Chinese restaurants across the country that are in need of workers. A child can obtain a listing for about $50 and then travel to the restaurant's location to start work.
我们有那个介绍所啊，就是他们里面有的他们就做广告，就是说他们就是用介绍的形式，然后他们那些人知道老板要是需要了，他们会打电话到这个地方嘛，然后我们有去找工作嘛，然后就是他就帮我们通过介绍，然后告诉我们地址，然后我们就去下去上班了。
Over the last 30 years, several bus companies grew to accommodate the demand for cheap transportation between Chinese communities throughout the country. While the job agencies, bus lines, restaurants, and snakeheads operate independent of one another, they all profit by exploiting the same people, immigrants in desperate need of money.
We have to work until 10, and we close the restaurant, and we take a shower, we come down, and then we cook something to eat. It's like a 12 or 2 o'clock already. And then we have to go to bed that time and get up in the morning, and then we'll keep working, just work, sleep, eat, work, sleep, eat.
When a white college kid gets a restaurant job, you know, they have protections. They can take breaks. They're not being screamed at or hit by their bosses. Their documents are in their control. You know, in these scenarios, it's not necessarily that the work is the worst work that's ever existed in the world. It's the conditions upon the work, and it's the lack of free will that the children have.
每天早上9点半就要去店里面了，然后就早上做菜务啊，就切水果啊，然后还有那个擦桌子啊这些东西嘛，然后客人就来了，我们就 service 啦。如果你要是店里很忙的话，菜务很多的话，有的时候都会加班到晚上凌晨1、2点哦。
I have clients who have badly injured themselves on the job because they're cutting their fingers open with sushi knives because they are 13 years old and they don't know how to make sushi, or they have bubbles on their skin from burning themselves with hot pans, and when they take a break, the boss screams at them.
Anything that the owner of the restaurant tells you to do, you do. And in accordance with Chinese culture, that's how kids are raised. They don't question anything that they find suspicious, or if they're suffering, they learn to swallow it and not bring it out.
住在老板的家里，大家都住在一起啊。如果你在大的店，有的时候会到30多个、40个人啊。如果小的话，就10来个，最少也有10多个。就是如果在大家店的话，就是2、3个女生嘛，住在一个房间。
We have to put the mattress on the floor and then just sleep. There's bugs everywhere, like flying in your room. It was gross. There's like bugs everywhere.
The child herself, they don't usually know, how long they're going to have to work, what it is that they're working off. or numbers will be thrown around, but a lot of times they don't even realize what that bottom line number is. And the parents are hesitant to tell them.
So I have some clients at this point who have been working and paying off debt for 6 or 7 years, and I continue to ask them, well, how much do you have left? And they say, my parents say it's still around $70,000 or $80,000, which just doesn't mathematically make sense. Most of my clients send money back to their parents, and then their parents say that they're paying the snakeheads. But again, most of my clients have no idea how much the debt actually is or how much they've paid off. So the level of, again, ignorance, it's really keeping the child in the shadows, and it allows for additional exploitation.
And this comes back to the Chinese culture and how we're expected, and I even feel it, in my own personal life, we're expected to provide and give back to the family, especially to the parents. And money is a big part of that.
Especially as second children, they're considered to be a burden at home, in their home countries, where their parents are required to pay fines or maybe bribes to local officials just in order to keep them out of trouble due to China's one-child policy. Growing up with that mentality that you are a burden to your family, it gives you a very high motivation to want to be like a useful and productive, valuable member of your family. And this is like the one chance, the one way of being able to do it is to be, sent to the U.S. and to help support the family back home.
What happens if you don't pay back your debt?
You get big trouble if you don't pay them. They don't tell you what happened, but you should know that. If you don't pay them, they go to your house, break your windows, break your doors, throw your things away, take your things.
What's your plan to pay it back?
赚钱。
I don't know anybody who's ever paid it all back of my clients. That's why we see a lot of these children later on in their lives turning to sex work. A lot of Chinese sex workers who you talk to, this was the beginning of their childhood. The restaurant lives are so horrible. The conditions are so exploitative that oftentimes someone says you can work in this massage parlor and you can make a lot more money, and then massage parlor turns to sexual activities. They just become so desperate to find some way to pay this off.
The notion of moving a child so that they can go and work somewhere is kind of intrinsically problematic. When it's a child, without the wherewithal or the judgment or the freedom to make those kinds of determinations, and I think also arguably without a really solid understanding of what those risks might involve before they ever leave their village in the first place, I think that you have someone who, more often than not, is going to be a victim in a fairly straightforward sense that often with the adults who are transported by snakeheads, you don't.
Beyond the kitchens, the living conditions, and even the immigration courts, the snakehead debt is ever present. Should a child qualify for legal aid or a green card, they will still have to pay off their debt to smugglers or loan sharks. Even if the children manage to pay off this debt, they remain trapped, bound by filial piety, to work and send money home to China.
You explore all different kinds of options that they might have. So you're going through all the different visas, T visas, U visas, asylum as an option, special immigrant juvenile status as an option.
Special immigrant juvenile status is a special status that would allow unaccompanied minors to be able to stay here due to the fact that they've been abused, abandoned, or neglected in their home country. And it would not be in their best interest to be returned to their home country due to their home or family situation.
Without that law, there would be absolutely no hope and no way for these kids to escape from their situations.
So the Chinese youth, it's pretty easy why they shouldn't be returned to their country of origin, because they are victims of human trafficking. The Chinese government doesn't give a lot of protections for victims of human trafficking, and the possibility of their being re-trafficked should they be returned to their country are pretty high. For T visas, however, the young person does have to comply with law enforcement, and obviously because we're talking about an international mafia-like organization, that's a huge risk for a lot of young people, which they're unwilling to take. The really tragic thing about these cases is they're sent to the United States and nothing gets better. I mean, they're away from the abuse, and I definitely have clients who describe this as being better than what it was, but it's really hard to find the hope for a lot of these kids.
还有一半呢，就以后要工作。
我不知道，可能要20-30万吧。我只是供我自己生活，就是因为我要在美国，我要吃，我要住，所以我要挣点钱。
是有钱人的天堂，没钱人的地狱。
As an advocate, you want your kids to eventually end up where they want to end up and be happy and be able to go on with their lives.
It's really about building that relationship with them so they feel like in the future, I could trust someone and I don't have to live in fear all the time. I don't have to have this really skewed view of society and human nature in general, and that I'm gonna be okay.
I want to be like a normal child, like a normal American. I'm thinking like I'm jealous of all those people, like normal American people. They went to our restaurant, they eat, they came with their family. I don't want to work there anymore.
不知道跟他们讲什么，然后就也没什么好讲的。他们也许会让我做，他们做的意思是，也许会让我觉得他们爱我弟弟比较多一点，但是我觉得我已经长大了，我没必要就那样子。可他们让我做的事，我一定会做的。
我感觉我们中国人，我们只是为了避难，而不是说非法来美国。毕竟，如果你在中国，你要用签证合法的来到美国，那是机会是非常非常的渺小。特别是在我那一边，就是基本上是没有一个人可以利用合法的签证来到美国。
What do you see yourself doing, say, 5 years from now?
5年以后，我没有想过这个问题，但是我想，如果可以的话，我就是不知道自己要做什么啦，反正就试一试咯。
The good days are when my clients tell me that they've fallen in love with somebody, or that they have, been promoted at their nail salon, or they get their green cards, or they say that they're mad at their parents. Those days feel really good when they say that they're mad about what's happened and you get to see them sort of take control over their lives again. The good days are when people call me saying they want to help. It's when people volunteer. It's when you feel like there's a community starting to be built around these children. The good days are just when they come in and they just start talking and they say they finally feel like they have someone they can open up to about these things, and it's getting bubble tea on the way back from court, and it's teaching them new pop songs in English, and they teach me Chinese pop songs, and it's just about the human relationships that are made, because I think that trafficking and exploitation of children is about killing what's human in them, and so seeing what makes them alive is really what makes the good days great.